Welcome back to the Mad Genius Thesis. Um, we always end up in these fascinating and sometimes kind of unsettling places when we look at creativity and mental illness. And today we're going deep into the life and music of Billie Holiday. We'll be using John Szwed's biography, Billie Holiday, the musician and the myth.
Yeah, and I think it's important to not just listen to her incredible music, but to really try and understand the woman behind those haunting vocals, as we search for clues about this whole brilliance and struggle thing.
And here's where it gets interesting, right? Szwed writes about Holiday as a teenager, failing a dance audition. Imagine that. You're devastated, right?
Mm.
Then, almost impulsively, she starts to sing.
Wow.
And the audience, instead of, just dismissing her, they're moved to tears. They're showering her with money.
What a powerful image, right, of
Yeah.
raw talent emerging from a moment of vulnerability.
Exactly. But it's also kind of like foreshadowing, like a hint of the turbulent path her life would take. So let's get into it. Holiday always talked about how much he loved Bessie Smith and Louis Armstrong.
Of course, giants of the blues world. But what's really fascinating is that Holiday's style, it wasn't just pure blues, right?
Right.
She drew inspiration from all sorts of singers. I mean, we're talking Ethel Waters, Libby Holman, even Fanny Bryce.
Wow, that's eclectic. So how do you see this blending of styles? How does it reflect a creative mind,
Yeah.
especially in the context of the mad genius?
Well, it kind of suggests this restless, searching quality, doesn't it? Like instead of just straightforwardly imitating her idols, she absorbed all these elements from all these different vocalists, almost like she was looking for her own unique voice, a sound that could break free from all the existing categories.
Yeah. And that makes sense when you think about how, at the time, the whole idea of a jazz singer was still evolving.
Absolutely. I mean, Holiday, along with all these other groundbreaking singers like Bessie Smith, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, they all came from this shared wellspring of musical influences. But they each forged their own distinct path. They were all defying these easy labels.
So what were those shared resources? I mean, what connected them? And maybe even more importantly, what made Holiday stand out? Was it just her vocal technique? She didn't have that big operatic voice like Ethel Waters.
No, she didn't. But what she did have was this incredible emotional depth. It was like her voice was this instrument for conveying these raw, unfiltered feelings. And then there was that signature style she became known for. That way she seemed to like almost hang back behind the beat.
Oh, yeah. It created this tension, this sense of anticipation. It was dangerous, but in a good way. Like she was pushing the boundaries of rhythm.
It's interesting you say pushing the boundaries because it wasn't simply lagging behind the beat. It was actually this incredibly complex technique called dual track time.
Dual track time. I've never heard that term before.
Basically, it's the idea that her vocals, they operate on a totally different rhythmic plane than the band. It's almost like you have these two clocks, right? And they're running at slightly different speeds, which creates this constant interplay between tension and release.
Wow. How is that even achieved? Are there any precedents for this kind of like rhythmic approach in other musical traditions?
Well, you definitely don't see it in like typical Western music. You might find little hints of it in like some 18th century Italian music. And I guess Chopin kind of experimented with something similar, but it wasn't the norm. Holiday's use of dual track time actually seems more akin to the cross rhythms you find in West African music or in Cuban and Latin American styles.
So she was incorporating like these global influences, all these different ways of experiencing rhythm into her jazz singing.
Exactly. And all of this was happening just as microphone technology was starting to come into its own. So instead of having to project her voice to fill a large space, she could use the mic to create this much more intimate, almost conversational style.
Which allowed for those nuanced vocal techniques, that emotional depth to just shine through.
Absolutely. And then as Holiday's voice matured and, maybe even lost a little bit of its range.
Her phrasing and her timing became even more powerful tools for emotional expression.
Yeah, like she wasn't just singing the words, she was inhabiting them, transforming them into something completely new. She would emphasize certain syllables, stretch phrases, add pauses, bringing in all these layers of meaning that went way beyond the composer's original intent.
It's fascinating how she did that with like all these familiar songs,
Mm-hmm.
taking something everyone knew and making it something utterly unique.
And maybe nowhere is this more evident than in Strange Fruit, a song that marked a turning point in Holiday's career. This haunting song about lynching, which, by the way, was sometimes banned from radio play, was a creative breakthrough for Holiday, but also a source of such immense personal pain. And, there are all these conflicting accounts of how strange fruit became part of her repertoire.
Really? So what are the different stories about how she came to sing this incredibly powerful and controversial song?
Well, some sources say that she was hesitant to perform it, that she found the subject matter just way too disturbing. Others suggest she actually embraced it as this form of, like, artistic and social commentary, a way to confront this horrific reality of racism in America.
Hmm. It's almost as if the song itself became this battleground,
Yeah.
between public perception and personal truth. Makes you wonder if the song's darkness actually fueled her own struggles, or if she was using it intentionally as, like, a platform for something bigger than herself.
It's a really complex question, and it's one that sort of resonates throughout her life and work, that tension between, like, public and private, between the persona she projected and the reality of her experiences. It kind of comes up again in her autobiography, Lady Sings the Blues.
That book was so raw and honest. She didn't shy away from anything. She detailed her struggles with addiction and the racism she faced. I remember reading it and just being struck by her courage to be so vulnerable.
You have to remember, though, that the book got a really mixed reaction when it was published. Some praised its honesty, while others were really critical. They said it was too revealing, too raw. It's interesting to compare its reception to Ethel Waters' autobiography, His Eye is on the Sparrow.
Right, right. Waters came from a similar background, faced a lot of the same hardships,
Hmm.
but her book had this more, like, redemptive narrative,
Yeah.
right? And it was really embraced by mainstream audiences.
It makes you wonder if America was just not ready for the unvarnished truth of Holiday's story.
Maybe not, no, but that unflinching honesty is part of what makes her story so compelling, so relevant even today. And that tension between public perception and personal truth, it comes into focus when you look at Holiday's relationship with certain songs.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What songs are you thinking of?
Well, there's God Bless the Child, which is often seen as, like, her signature song. Such a powerful anthem of resilience, especially coming from someone who faced so much adversity. But even the origin of that song is, well, it's shrouded in these conflicting accounts. Wait, really? I always assumed that she wrote it. If she didn't, then where did it come from?
Well, Arthur Herzog Jr., a songwriter she worked with, claims that he wrote both the music and the lyrics in just 20 minutes after Holiday gave him the phrase, God bless the child.
Wow, that's wild. A song that iconic, written that quickly. It's hard to believe.
It does seem a bit far-fetched, doesn't it? And Holiday's version is that the phrase came to her after a fight with her mother, and that the whole song just, like, fell into place in her head like it was this pre-existing thing she was just channeling.
So who do we believe? I mean, couldn't this just be a case of Herzog misremembering what happened, or maybe even trying to claim more credit than he deserved?
Oh, it's definitely possible. And to make things even more complicated, the official sheet music actually credits both Holiday and Herzog, but doesn't specify who wrote what. So we're left with this mystery, this unresolved question about authorship.
Yeah. It sounds like there was a lot of tension in their relationship, especially later in her career. So maybe it was a genuine collaboration,
Yeah.
but they just couldn't agree on who deserved more credit. Or maybe they both intentionally downplayed the other person's contribution.
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but these conflicting accounts, they offer this little glimpse into the complexities of artistic creation, right? They make you wonder how much of Holiday's genius was really about intuition and inspiration, and how much was really craft and collaboration.
Yeah. And it reminds us that even with a ton of documentation, there are always these gaps in the story. And those gaps can get filled with all sorts of speculation and interpretation. Which brings us back to this whole idea of the mad genius. I mean, are we just reading too much into these discrepancies? Are we projecting our own narratives onto Holiday's life?
I mean, maybe. Or maybe these discrepancies are actually clues to a deeper truth about her creative process. Like maybe that tension, the struggle between different versions of reality, was part of what fueled her artistry.
That's a really interesting thought. Maybe it's not about choosing one narrative over the other, but it's about acknowledging the multiplicity of perspectives, the ways they all kind of contribute to our understanding of Holiday's genius.
Right. And I think that's what makes her music so powerful, so enduring, you know? It invites us to engage with those complexities, to wrestle with the messy, contradictory nature of her life and art,
It's a reminder that creativity doesn't always fit neatly in the boxes.
and that maybe those messy, uncomfortable spaces are where true genius actually resides.
Speaking of discomfort, can we go back to that that behind the beat technique for a second. It wasn't just about lagging behind the rhythm. It was something much more sophisticated than that, right?
You're exactly right. It wasn't just singing against the beat. She was creating this whole rhythmic world, like within the existing structure of the song.
Right, that's where the term dual track time comes in.
Precisely. It's this fascinating concept of, like, two rhythmic systems working simultaneously. The band follows one beat, while her vocals adhere to a different one. So you get this constant push and pull.
So she's like walking this tightrope between two musical worlds, which must have taken incredible skill and control. Did any other singers use this technique?
Not in the same way that Holiday did. It's really part of what made her sound so unique, so captivating. And, you have to remember, all of this was happening in the context of a live performance, right? With a band that was also improvising.
So it wasn't just about her individual talent. It was about this incredible synergy, this back and forth between her and the musicians she was playing with.
Yeah, it was this remarkable feat of musical coordination and creativity, a real testament to her ability to not only hear those subtle shifts in rhythm, but also to communicate them to the band, right? Creating this shared musical experience that defied expectations.
And then there's her phrasing. It's mind-blowing, the way she could manipulate the rhythm of a song without actually altering the lyrics.
It's as though she was both speaking the words and singing them simultaneously, blurring those lines between speech and song. She'd elongate syllables, add pauses, emphasize specific words. It was a level of nuance and depth that no one had brought to popular songs before.
Can you give some examples of this, like specific moments in a song where we can really hear this in action?
Well, listen to her version of I Cover the Waterfront, for instance. Pay attention to how she stretches out the word waterfront, holding onto that vowel sound almost like she's savoring the word itself. Or listen to how she pauses after the phrase, I'm watching for you, creating this feeling of longing and anticipation.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I hear it now. It's like she's breathing life into the lyrics. They're more than just words on a page.
Exactly. It's this combination of rhythmic innovation and emotional depth that made her phrasing so unique, so powerful.
And it's interesting how she applied this technique to all sorts of songs, blues, ballads, torch songs. It's like she was able to find the emotional core of any song, no matter the genre.
Even Porgy and Bess, which was a pretty controversial opera at the time.
Right, an opera about black people, but it was written by white composers and performed by an all-white cast initially. And then there were calls for boycotts, debates about authenticity, cultural appropriation.
Actually, yeah, it was a real cultural lightning rod.
And yet Holiday embraced it. She recorded several songs from it.
Which speaks to her willingness to, transcend boundaries, right? To challenge conventions, to find that beauty and emotional depth in unexpected places. Her version of I Loves You, Porgy is a perfect example. She takes this operatic aria and transforms it into something so deeply personal, so heartbreaking.
Like she stripped away all the theatrical stuff and got right to the core of the emotion, right? Made it raw and vulnerable. It's really beautiful.
And that ability to connect with the raw human experience, to express that vulnerability and resilience through her music, is what ultimately made Holiday a legend. Yeah. It's why people are still drawn to her music today. There's this timeless quality to her voice, this ability to communicate across generations.
And I think that's why this whole mad genius question is still relevant,
Yeah.
It makes us think about the complexities of creativity, the interplay between talent and suffering, resilience.
And with Holiday, those elements were just inextricably intertwined. But instead of trying to, pull them apart, maybe it's better to just appreciate the tapestry they created. To listen to her music with open hearts and open minds, recognizing that even in all that pain, there was an extraordinary beauty. A brilliance.
Yeah, it's like you were saying earlier, that raw vulnerability in her voice. And it's even more powerful when you think about all the, the challenges she faced, especially the racism that was so deeply ingrained in the music industry back then.
It really was. And, it wasn't just a personal struggle either. Racism actually shaped her professional opportunities.
Oh, you mean like having to perform in segregated venues?
Exactly. And the limited radio play, it's hard to even imagine the barriers she had to overcome just to be heard,
Did they even market her early recordings specifically to black audiences?
Yeah, they were called race records. It was like a whole separate category in the music industry. It was designed to segregate black artists limit their exposure to wider audiences.
Wow, I had no idea. So it wasn't until later in her career that she started, like, recording with white bands and performing for these, like, more diverse crowds?
Right, but even then, she was often, like, relegated to these supporting roles. Take the film New Orleans, for example.
Wait, she was in a movie.
Yeah, she was. But they cast her as, get this, a maid. I mean, it's mind-boggling to think that someone with her talent was still being offered these, like, stereotypical roles.
Well, it's like Hollywood couldn't see past her race, even though she was, like, a global icon by that point.
Mm.
And then there was a constant battle with drug addiction and the stigma that came with it.
Yeah, she was arrested, harassed by the police. It's almost as if society was determined to punish her for her struggles, you know? And that punishment actually extended to her ability to work,
Right?
right? Didn't they deny her the cabaret card she needed to perform in New York City clubs?
Yeah, that's right. What's a cabaret card?
So basically, it was a license you needed to perform in any venue that served alcohol. And without it, Holiday's options were really limited.
It's just heartbreaking. It's like she was trapped in this impossible situation. You know, she needed to work to support herself and her addiction, but they were denying her the very opportunities that would allow her to do so.
Yeah, it's this tragic irony. It speaks to the deeply ingrained biases of the time.
It's hard to imagine creating such powerful, moving music while going through all that.
And yet, in the middle of all these challenges, she kept creating, kept performing, sharing her gift with the world.
There's this, like, fierce resilience there,
Right.
a refusal to be silenced. It's inspiring.
It really is. And it's a reminder that even in the face of, overwhelming adversity, the human spirit can find these ways to express itself, to connect with others, to create beauty.
So after all this time with Holiday's story, what stayed with you? Has it changed how you hear her music at all?
Yeah, for me, I think it's really deepened my understanding of that connection between her art and her life experiences. Her genius wasn't just about, vocal technique or her use of rhythm. It was about her ability to channel those difficult experiences, the pain, the vulnerability, and to turn them into something beautiful, profound.
That's what makes her music so timeless, so relatable, right?
Yeah.
It speaks to that shared human experience of struggle and resilience.
It does,
Yeah.
and it brings us right back to this idea of the mad genius, doesn't it? Can we appreciate the artistry without glamorizing the pain? Can we do it without falling into those, simplistic narratives that just reduce complex individuals to stereotypes?
Well, I think we can. I mean,
So-
by acknowledging the complexity of her life, all the systemic forces that worked against her, and the incredible resilience she demonstrated, we can celebrate her brilliance, but also, recognize that human cost.
Exactly. And I encourage everyone listening to, go back and listen to her music. Really pay attention to the lyrics, the phrasing, those emotions she conveys, and, draw your own conclusions about that connection between her creative genius and her struggles.
Because ultimately, her music is a gift, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit.
It is, and it's a gift that deserves to be, cherished and shared.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Billie Holiday.
Until next time, keep exploring the complexities of the creative mind.
And remember, genius can bloom even in the most unlikely of places.